Juan Carlos Sandoval was a caballero, a cowboy, in Argentina. But Juan Carlos Sandoval was not born in Argentina. He was born in Morocco with the name of Yakov. But when he came to Argentina, fleeing persecution in Morocco, he loved the people, he loved the culture, and he took on this caballero personality. But he also gave up his Judaism and his Zionism. His son, though, was inspired by his lack of Judaism and his love for Israel, that he pledged to become a Jewish warrior. He wished to bring back a vibrant Judaism to himself that he was never given. He wanted to bring back Juan Carlos Sandoval to Yakov. And so he became a rabbi. I heard this story this past week from Juan Carlos Sandoval's granddaughter, the sociologist Michal Biton. She was speaking to 120 rabbis, myself included, in Miami, at a conference, the first ever put on by the LaFell Foundation, called Zionism, A New Conversation. This conference was planned over a year ago when Israel was involved with civil strife, people on the right and the left and the center taking to the streets. And we North American rabbis felt an urge to gather across denominations, across political divides, and across geographical areas. That was a year ago. This conference took place 145 days after October 7th. And the questions we had were more relevant than ever. You heard it right. 120 rabbis, 250 opinions, in the same room, trying to understand what it would mean to go back to our communities to reclaim Zionism. So that each of us, each of those rabbis from around North America could ensure that Juan Carlos Sandoval always had a route back to Yakov. And so this morning, one question and two suggestions that I found in Miami about how each of us in this community can reclaim our Zionism. The first question that came out was, who are we as American Jews? If you go back 10 years or 11 years now, in 2013, there was the Pew study, and it found that a large percentage of American Jews didn't identify strongly with either Judaism or very decreasing numbers connected to a relationship with the land of Israel. In fact, it was the creation of the Jew as the sovereign self, meaning I am an individual, I can make my Jewish choices by myself, and nobody can judge me for those. And it sounds right. But when we do that individually, we lose something else. It's called peoplehood. Dr. Rachel Fish, an expert in combating anti-Semitism and founder of an amazing think tank called Boundless, which has unbelievable Israel resources, she told us that this last generation of American Jews, my grandparents, some of you, some of your parents, but definitely at least or at most 3 generations, we all came to this country fleeing persecution. We consisted of a people wanting to be so American. We chose to live here. We didn't choose to live in the land of Israel. But we also desired a strong connection to that place. And so we gave tzedakah. We went and visited. We connected with the people. But we were still here. And in so doing, in making that choice, which is a good one, in being fully American Jews, we lost that sense of peoplehood. But twice since then, there has been a Jewish reawakening. The first, 1967, the Six-Day War, when we thought a second Holocaust would happen before I was born. But the second in my own lifetime, on October 7th. And in those 2 moments of Jewish history, we understand that we would no longer be the subjects of Jewish history, but rather we would be the actors. For decades, anti-Semitism was just a relic of our past. But 150 days ago, our entire worldview was shattered. Dr. Fish elaborated that for 75 years, Zionism she described as the very famous children's book, The Little Engine That Could. Other countries will look at us and our people and they say, how could you do that? It's miraculous. 15 years ago, we all read the book by Dan Senor, The Startup Nation. But today, Rachel Fish said, in order to reclaim our Zionism, we have to change that name of Startup Nation to Stand Up Nation. Stand Up Nation. Because our Zionism, as we heard just a couple of weeks from Zohar Aviv, from Birthright, that we can't define our Zionism going from crisis to crisis, living in a safe space, but rather we have to create brave spaces to have these discussions. Rachel Fish said that as Americans, we always like to give our gifts with a special bow on top. We in fact do that for all of our bar and bat mitzvah gifts too. But she said in order to reclaim the Zionism that we really need, it has to be a little more messier than a bow on top. Because messy is the only way to reclaim this, when we in fact do not live in that home that we are reclaiming. And so the second point, how to have that conversation in reclaiming our home. And that point was really drilled home by somebody who was not Jewish, but somebody who was a friend of Israel and the Jewish people, Congressman Richie Torres. Congressman Torres addressed 120 rabbis as a minority, as an African American, as a Latino, as an LGBTQ individual, as a college dropout representative from the Bronx. And he had to explain to us why he loved the Jewish state. He said on his first visit to Israel, when he saw the children running from rockets in Sderot, it reminded him of his own neighborhood in the South Bronx, when those children were running from bullets. Those children were suffering from the same PTSD as his children in his neighborhood. And he thought there had to be another way. And so he told the well-known story of Napoleon. That Napoleon once walked by a European synagogue and he asked, it was on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, when we were commemorating the destruction of the temple, and he said, what are these people doing? And it was a French Jewish officer that told Napoleon, for 2,000 years, these people have prayed for what they have lost, the destruction of the temple in their land. And Napoleon looked at this Jewish officer and he said, a people that prays for their land for 2,000 years will surely one day deserve to return home. Congressman Torres told us that any member of the United States Congress who visits Israel will explain what Napoleon felt on that day, that this land has a people that it is their home. But he also said, it's not going to come very easy. And so finally, the third point, brought home by New York Times opinion journalist Bret Stephens, a past recipient of the Abner and Roz Goldstein Scholar in Residence just a couple of years ago. And his lesson to us was to reclaim Zionism, we must not lose our fear factor. He said in a recent interview with Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, this is what Bennett told him. He said, in 50 years from now, people should say that October 7th was the worst day in our country's history, and it also is the day that our country was saved. We all know this. On October 7th, as Rabbi Guzek and I have said week after week after week, we American Jews really did not understand how much we love our people and how much we want to cherish and preserve that land. And so we as American Jews must ask ourselves, how can we not let our guard down? Our story must be told by us. And our story must not be told about us. Bret Stephens told us that his mother was a Holocaust survivor, and just recently, she said to him, Bret, I was born into a world of hiding, and I do not want to die in a world that is hiding. If we are to grant her wish, we must tell the story, and the story must not be told about us. These three stories, Dr. Rachel Fish, Congressman Richie Torres, and journalist Bret Stephens, they may have been told to 120 rabbis in Miami, but these stories are not new. For the work that we are doing in reclaiming Zionism are found in the ultimate diaspora story in our Bible that we'll read in 2 weeks as we dress up in costume, and that's the story of Esther. For was it not Mordechai and Esther who believed that not only Haman could be abolished and destroyed, but who also believed that a different world could exist than what it is today? So what is the power of reclaiming Zionism? It's the same power that Queen Esther had. She had a belief that if she were a link in that chain, then she would find talents inside herself that she did not even know existed yet. And that she would find those talents by having emunah, faith in God. Now don't get me wrong, this is not the simple faith that everything is going to go right like a Disneyland fairy tale. Because Esther knew that she too could lose it all. But her faith was based on a courage that understood that if she did some things right in the presence of the divine, she would not only strengthen herself, but she would strengthen others as well. After 3 days in Miami with 120 rabbis, and I heard these words that I knew I was going to bring back to you, I was also overwhelmed. We're really up to this task of reclaiming Zionism as rabbis, but most importantly as a community. And I thought about Juan Carlos and Yakov, and I wondered if that story is really applicable today. And then I came back on Wednesday, and I heard some commotion in Cone Chapel right before school was about to end. And I walked into Cone Chapel. There I saw Rabbi Taff, surrounded by our middle school, by Sinai Akiba Academy, and just a little later, surrounded by our Sinai Temple Religious School. And with him were 9 young men in their mid-20s. One young man introduced himself that he was from Los Angeles. He had been a Chayal Boded. He works in real estate here, but he was a lone soldier just a couple of years ago in Israel. He literally was playing basketball with our Atid group. But the next day he was called, and on October 8th, he was on a plane back to Israel with his unit. He told our children that he was reclaiming his Zionism. Another soldier introduced himself that he was from France. Another soldier was from Ashkelon, whose house was hit by rockets time and time again these last few years. Another soldier was from Tel Aviv, who was in Nepal on October 7th, who had to walk many kilometers just to get Wi-Fi to see where he had to go. Another of those soldiers was traveling in South America. That was all on October 7th. They were ordinary citizens, regular Jews like you and me. But on October 8th, they reclaimed their Zionism. And they were here to tell our children what that was all about. They were here to remind us that no matter how much we desire and love that caballero lifestyle, how much we want to be that Juan Carlos Sandoval, no matter how close we become to becoming Juan Carlos, we must always remember that Yaakov sits in our soul, ready to be awakened, ready to be activated, and ready to reclaim our Zionism and our return home. Shabbat Shalom. Am Yisrael Chai.